Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs. Today I have with me Ben Gaum. Ben Gaum I was introduced to via kind of like a loose introduction through Brenda Eisen. Yes, Brenda, I have dropped your name yet again.
Yay, Brenda.
Ben has a studio. It is called Project Studio Architects. He also has a division of that. It's called Blockhouse. Ben, you will go ahead and at some stage here explain the differences between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Ben and I had an introductory call back in the summer of 2024. Kind of hit it off on our call, talking about really just kind of the industry at large.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, let's do this. Let's have a conversation about your studio.
Yeah.
So
Great.
So thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We enjoyed some food, as those that come to record here do.
Some food, some nice guitars.
Yeah, some nice guitars. Yeah, Ben is, I would say, like a relatively well-accomplished guitar player.
Thank you.
What did we play? We played a Gretsch. We played a Gibson Les Paul. Played an Alvarez inside an acoustic.
Yeah, never saw that before.
All right. And what's actually really cool is, Ben, now you join a few others that have picked up and played guitars here. So I know I'm going to name drop a few others because Sam Sachs, you were a guitar player. And Laura Stein, you were also a guitar player.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's been kind of fun to be able to have
the creatives coming out.
Right?
Yeah.
So Ben, again, thanks for joining. Let's get into it. Let's why don't you start with, actually, before we go and explain the studios, why don't we talk about, as I do with most, early inception. What led you into a career of design early on in your life? Was there a pivotal moment?
I mean, for me, it was really early on. I mean, I can even remember, I don't remember what they were called, but you know, there were these tests that you would take in grade school.
Oh, I remember those.
You remember the test, and you would it was a whole, you would check out the boxes, whatever.
Yeah.
And then a week later, you'd get this report back, and it was to sort of tell you what you should go into. You know, and everybody was getting, I don't know, sort of pseudotypical, you're really good in science, so you should go into medicine, or
right.
You're really good with writing, you should go into law. And mine came back and it said, you're right down the middle. You're very creative, and you're very scientific thinker. So it literally said, I mean, this must have been grade 5 when it said you should be an architect. And I sort of thought, wow, that's I like that. I like that. I mean, I like the and it's sort of interesting. I think, you know, it's a very centrist profession, right? You know, because it's exactly that. It really is the exact line that that lies between arts and science. And I find that I have a centrist approach to really everything in my life, right? Political or social or you know, or work related, whatever. So it's always really aligned with sort of everything in my being, which is, you know, when you get to architecture school, they tell you that on day one, that it's like, this is not just, you're not just learning a skill to go out there and become, you know, to become an architect. It's something that becomes your life. It is you, right? So that really always spoke to me. So for me, it was really early on.
And did you know in grade 5 what an architect was and what they did?
No, I mean, generally, I mean, I started looking into it, right? To the point where when I went to high school, you know, I went to you know, high school up in Richmond Hill. It was an all French immersion high school.
I didn't actually say that. Sorry. Yeah. But Ben's practice is run out of Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. And yes, grew up just on the northern outskirts of the city of Toronto.
In Thornhill, yeah. So at the end of high school, I had finished sort of the regular high school part early. So I decided to go to another high school purely because they had an architecture and drafting program.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so really early on, I knew. But even, it's funny. I mean, even though that I knew early on that I wanted to do this, it was a roundabout way of doing it, right? So, you know, the first degree I got was actually an architectural technology degree. You know, I wasn't so enamored with school, and I liked the idea of going to a college program and getting a skill and coming out and just being able to jump into the workforce. I also knew from my research how brutal architecture school and architecture in general was. So I wanted to dip my toe in first, right? So I was really just planning on doing an architectural technology for 1 year and then switching out, but I really liked it. I finished the degree. I worked in the industry as an architectural technologist for about 3 years until I decided, okay, I think I'm ready. I'm mature enough. I was mature enough to know how immature I was, which was great. I knew that I was not ready for architecture school at 20 years old, right? So I did that degree, worked for 3 years, and then decided it's time to go back and go to architecture school, become a full licensed architect. So yeah.
Interesting.
That's my roundabout way, but it's benefited me because I think architecture, they'll also tell you that architecture, I mean, that's why you see so many architects who are still working in their 70s and 80s, because it becomes this lifelong passion, that it's something that you just do as a passion, you do because of passion, but it's also something that like you're just continuously, it's not like, okay, I've learned everything I need to learn and now it's just this continuous thing. You're constantly learning, right?
Yeah.
So I think me sort of starting my true architectural career like in my 30s as opposed to my 20s wasn't really a detriment. If anything, it was a benefit, right? I was able to get an architectural technology degree, which a lot of architects, they come out of architecture school.
Yeah, which school, by the way?
I did my technology degree at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a great school. Really, really good focus on just real deal. I'm also old enough I was right again, this parallel of being right in the center line between these two paradigms, right? So when I started my architectural technology degree, everything was hand drawn, and they had like by the first year of the degree, they had like 2 computers off in the corner. They're like, hey, there's this new thing called AutoCAD. If you guys want to go try and figure that out, go ahead. But everything is hand drawn. So I got to like hand draw, and I'm the last generation of kids that got to actually hand draw working drawings and feel what that actually felt like. But again, by the time we were finished that program, everything was on computer. Right. So just being able to get that technical background, that knowledge, and that old school knowledge of architecture. And then from there, I went to Dalhousie to do my undergrad, and then Ryerson to do my master's. And again, me going to Ryerson was what's that?
I'm laughing because you're saying like I wasn't all that like enamored with school. And yet here you are.
Well, it's true. I mean, listen, well, part of that is because maybe I shouldn't say this on a podcast, but part of that is because I became diagnosed later in life in my professional career as ADHD. And I know it's been thrown around a ton these days and whatever, but it's a real thing. And part of me not being enamored in school, in high school especially, was and that translated into like, not the greatest marks and just sort of stuff like that. Right. But as soon as I got to architecture school, ADHD, for anybody who is out there and has it and knows anything about it, you become hyper focused on things you're passionate about. Right. So it's the same reason why you put a guitar in my hand and you're at risk at, not getting it out of my hand for the next 2 or 3 hours. Architecture is the same thing. Right. So as soon as I got to architecture school, it was hyper focus on everything, right? So it wasn't sort of a stretch or difficult for me to sort of envision and be in that school environment, whereas before it was, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then went to Ryerson for my master's, and that was
and
that was good because that was all about getting back to Dalhousie was great because it taught me how to tap into creativity. But a lot of these schools, and I've got some issues with architectural education. There's way too much focus on design and creativity. I'm talking like 75% of your time in architecture school is dedicated to design and creativity. And, you come out in the real world and like, maybe 50%, but it's actually way less than that, but is dedicated to creativity. They're not teaching anything about, civics or how to deal with, zoning or just these elements that you're dealing with for a lot more percentage of your day than the creative part. Right?
Sales.
Everything, business development, running a bit like anything business related, especially when you're in a master's degree, the assumption is that, these people are getting a master's degree because at least portion of them have this vision of opening up their own firm one day, right? And
Right.
the fact that they don't offer any, or when I was there, they don't offer any,
Yeah.
any classes or any information or knowledge into business or taxes or finance or marketing or anything like that. Right?
HR.
So, HR, anything, right? So when I opened up my own firm 7 years ago, it was like learning an entirely new set of skills, right? So I'm still learning to this day, right? It's really, really, if I would have had at least somewhat of a background, and you can have business classes related specifically to architecture, because architecture is so unique, right? Like when you talk to marketing firms, the way sort of your everyday company out there markets seems to be really, really different than how architecture firms need to market themselves. And so I think that's those are
some areas for improvement within the education system.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. So tell me then, what did it look like when you finished school? Where did you land your first gig?
Man, when I finished school, it was right smack dab middle in 2008. It was like the world was crumbling.
Yeah.
The whole world was crumbling, and we were there. I was like, okay, congratulations, you just graduated. Go out there in the real world. And I was like, oh my God. So luckily I landed a job at KIRKOR Architects, which is a big firm here in Toronto. It's great. It was a great place to like learn about, it's not a design firm. It's more of a developer driven firm, condo driven firm. But, in 2008, 2009, it was like, that's what it was for the next 10, 15 years in Toronto. It's all developer driven condo projects, right? So cut my teeth on that. But they really taught me about the importance of the business of architecture.
Right.
And they taught me the importance of not just design and pretty drawings. It was about production and working drawings and good working drawings and that technical skill and that technical knowledge, right? So that was sort of, that was really interesting, right? And they were also a huge proponent of being progressive with the technologies, right? So instead of AutoCAD, they were training us on Revit, which is the sort of the next. It's not even the next wave. Like I'm surprised that there's firms out there that are still using AutoCAD, to be honest. But so that was good, and worked there for 3 years, and then just moved on to all the different worked for a bunch of different big firms, big and small firms in the city of Toronto.
And what were skills of the projects that you're working on? What do they look like?
Yeah, it was everything from the bigger firms. It tended to be high rise mixed use residential projects.
Okay.
And then the smaller firms was more mid rise mixed use. It was mostly all residential. Then I decided I wanted
multifamily.
Yeah, multifamily and multi-res, mixed, a lot of mixed use stuff. And but even right out of the gate, while I was working at KIRKOR, my first job out of school, I was, I had that entrepreneurial spirit. I was out there doing my own jobs on the side. So I was doing a lot of single family homes, a lot of additions, renovations, a couple new builds, stuff like that. So, I always knew that I really liked running my own show and doing my own thing. So so going from different firm, again, from bigger firm to smaller firm, and the more I was out there working, for me anyways, I realized that being at smaller firms was better. I think it had to do with my ADHD, the fact that at a smaller firm you can't just be stuck doing one thing, right? Like you have to wear 10 different hats, right?
Yeah.
So I think my ADD was a real godsend. It really sort of helped me figure that out for me. For me, anyway, it's a personal thing. Like some people can go in and sort of have one specific job in their office and do that. I'm not that. So eventually in 2017, when it became there was an opportunity for me and a partner to open up our own firm. We opened it up and ran with it, and sort of haven't looked back. So. Yeah, so it was 7 years in September.
Wow.
Yeah. So far, so good, I guess.
You've turned 7.
Yeah.
Amazing.
7, a big 7, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so what did it look like for you? You go out on your own, you're starting this practice with a partner.
Yeah.
And did you have any projects that you were
you were
walking into?
It was a very cool sort of progression, right? Like we were both working at it was a very, very large American firm called Humphreys Partners Canada. They had opened up a Canadian office here in Toronto. They're a huge firm in the States doing a lot of student housing and purpose-built rental and stuff like that. Great firm. It was a great firm, and after 5 years, right? So, I mean, this is a whole discussion on the state of, building the architectural and building and development world in Toronto specifically. But, after 5 years, they were just so fed up with how development works here in Canada, especially in Ontario, that it was ridiculous to them. Like in the States, it's like you call up an architect, I want to build a 20-story building. Okay, you go through a year of zoning, then you put your shovels in the ground. So like in 2 years, you've got your building, right? And in Toronto, everybody knows that that's not the case. I mean, if you're building a big project, it could take 10 years, 5 to 10 years at least, right? So they were just super fed up with that, and they were just going to shut down the office. But I'd sort of recognized that we had projects in early conceptual stages that we had big good contracts signed with these clients. So me and my partner recognized that, like, hey, this could be a win-win for everybody, right? I mean, they're going to be in breach of contract if they just up and leave, and we could take them over, right? So we had two really good projects. One was a 144 unit condo building.
Wow.
And the other one was a 64 unit purpose-built rental. And those were the two projects that we had gone out and gotten those projects anyways, and we had done all the work, and they were our projects. They were just sort of under Humphreys' name. So they signed those contracts over to us, and we opened up our own firm, and so we hit the ground running. It was great, because typically when firms start up, they've got to build up their portfolio, a lot of just renderings until you can sort of convince. I mean, we had like 2 built buildings, by the end of our second or third year, right? So, and they were good projects, right? Like really, really good projects. And both of them were very progressive projects. That sort of set up the narrative for our firm. Our firm has I don't know if it's become known for, but we really started to take pride on the fact that we were not afraid to be really progressive and really look into either design concepts or construction methods that were not convention at all, right? So, and it was not easy, right? Like that 144 unit condo building that we built out in Hamilton, that was 100% precast building. So, and when I say 100% precast building, I mean 100% precast building. It was like, 2 football fields worth of like the largest like Lego set, 3D Lego set you'd ever see, right? So first of all, I had to design every piece individually, and then I had to figure out how to put this thing together, right? So, I mean, during the fact, it was a total nightmare. But after the fact, you look back and you're like, wow, I'm pretty proud of myself for being able to actually do that, right? Like, it's an insanely difficult thing to do. So,
do you think after that you could be on Survivor and solve all of their difficult puzzles now?
Oh yeah, for sure. After putting that thing together, no problem. So it was good. It was really good. And the other one, the 64 unit building, was a again, using a lot of like prefabricated steel stud panel systems for the exterior walls and stuff. So again, like stuff that it's not totally new, but a lot of people talk about it, and you'll see it at trade shows or you see it in the magazines, oh, that's a cool idea, but you'll never. So we were actually doing it, right? We were actually saying, yeah, let's do it, right? So, and that sort of continued on to, some of the creative design work that we were doing, the project that we were doing for Associated Hebrew School, for example, like really out there design. So using like full on parametric designing and then fabricating, right? It's one thing to like, do a really cool parametric design on your computer, your Rhino or Revit. And it's great. It looks really good as an architectural student, presentation, right? But then you have to think, oh, this is a real project. Now I have to get that built. Like, how the hell am I going to
figure out how to do this?
So I had to figure out how to get this thing built, right? So I had to contact a fabricator, have him like understand how to fight it. So it was, but again, I think that's part of the challenge. It's part of the way that my brain works. Like if there's, like let's have a really complicated problem to solve.
Right.
And that's part of the excitement of the design. And if you can get something to look good aesthetically as well as solve a complicated design problem. Like that's, to me, that's, the height of architecture, right? Like that's really where form and function get as close together as
Right.
possible, right? That's something that we talk about all the time, is form equals function, form equals function. Unfortunately, I drive around the streets of Toronto, and I see some of the buildings or the homes being built, and I'm like, man, that's just all form. Like if I were to go up into that extruded box up in your house, like there's nothing special up there. It's a bathroom or something, right? Like, so yeah. So I think having that approach, like having a real, functional problem to solve, and if you can solve that with form, it's.
What is your definition of form?
I mean, form is the aesthetic, right? So, but you see so much form that isn't doing anything other than being form, right? And it's like, form. That's what I'm saying. It's like, you have form and you have function. Those are the two sort of major elements of an architectural design, anyways. And the closer you can get those together, it's like if you have a staircase that has the pull-out drawers underneath, yes, right? Like that, that's a sort of a very watered down example of form equaling function, right? It's like it looks cool, it's aesthetically, it works, but it's almost, you can't decide what hits you more, the form or the function of it, right? So,
right.
Yeah. So
you start this practice, you have these two projects, which is, again, I mean, that's we got to acknowledge it, and you've said it, but it's a pretty special thing to be able to start a practice with some business.
Yeah, it's
right.
Huge. It's huge.
And so what happens? Do you stay together as a partnership?
I mean, yeah. Hopefully that's the case. Unfortunately, that's not what happened with us. My partner decided that she just wasn't. The other thing you realize is everybody thinks, especially in architecture school, I don't know, maybe in other professions too. You become a professional and you think, I'm going to go out there and hang my shingle and be my own person.
Yeah.
It's a real eye-opening awakening when you actually go out and do it, because you realize you're either a person who is built for that or not. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that people that aren't, there's nothing wrong with that. Recognizing that, like, that you're not built for that. Yeah. Is huge, because it really is like being an entrepreneur and going out and running your own firm, whether it's architecture or, running your own restaurant or whatever it is. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart. My watch doesn't have a 5 o'clock. There's no 5 o'clock on my watch. It's just a number on my watch. It doesn't mean the end of my day, So you're literally working, in some respects, you're working 24 hours a day, really. So it's really that recognition. And I give her all the kudos in the world for after the fourth year, just sort of coming to that realization that she was just like, this is not what I want to do, right? Like, I don't want to be a partner in a firm. I just want to go work in a firm. And so that was that. So we separated. I kept the business and kept moving forward with the practice. So,
and was the business at that stage where you still focused on multi-res?
Yeah, I mean, basically, one of the hardest things for, especially, I mean, I can only speak to architects really, but so one of the hardest things is really defining yourself and having that niche. It's really, really hard to do. And especially in architecture. So, so I think for a long time, I mean, my bulk of my experience and expertise was in residential. Mm-hmm. So it was mostly a residential firm, but we liked to say, for better or for worse, I don't know if this was a good thing or not, but we like to sort of have a boutique approach to multi projects, right? So no matter what it was, so we were doing some commercial projects and retail projects, and some government projects with Toronto Community Housing that weren't residential in nature.
And so you were applying for like RFPs to be able to be awarded those types of projects?
Yeah. We actually got a really, really good contract with Toronto Community Housing for to redo. There was eight or nine different architects that got awarded these contracts for. There was over 100 hubs, so they were decentralizing their hubs for the residential components. So it was for the tenants in the buildings to be able to have a hub to go to, talk about rent or talk about your
Right.
the issues that we were having in your house. So good. It was they were good projects. Again, we took a very progressive approach to it. Yeah, those are good, and those are good important projects for a small firm to have, right? Like the sort of bread and butter projects that and they're good. And at the end of the day, we like the fact that it had a social component to it that we could feel good about as well, right?
Right.
So yeah, so that was good. And then, fairly recently, I can sort of segue that into the Blockhouse.
Yeah,
Blockhouse stuff. Yeah, so
I was gonna say, so when does Blockhouse become something?
Yeah, so Blockhouse became, when the city opened up, I think it was 2018, 2019, they opened up the new bylaw for laneway and garden suites. So I thought that's great. I had a tenant in our basement, and it started off as me just wanting to do one because I like the idea of getting the tenant out of my basement and into a laneway house.
Dedicated space.
And I'm an architect. I was like, great, this is a bonus. I can just do my own project. And so I did the original design, and I did it in wood frame construction, just regular wood frame. And I started to go out and get it priced. And just the pricing that was coming back was just so astronomical. And it was so insane that there was just flat out no way I could do it. It was either you find another way of doing this, or you just don't do it at all. It's just you can't afford it. So it sort of forced me again to go into my creative mode of like, what's the problem here? How do I solve the problem? And how do I do it in a creative and aesthetic way and get form to equal function and all of that sort of stuff? And it sort of took me back to my Dalhousie days. Dalhousie's, if not the biggest, one of the biggest shipping centers in North America, and we were sort of inundated with shipping containers out there.
Right.
And it sort of reminded me of that. And I started to look at the shipping container as a building block for this urban context. Mm-hmm. And the more I looked at it, the more it just worked perfectly. It just, dimension wise, sort of logistically in terms of shipping them around easily and craning them up easily and all this sort of stuff. So the more I looked into it, the more it just opens itself up as a really, really viable solution for this problem, and not just a solution for my problem, but it really became eye-opening when I actually had to go to committee of adjustment because, as much as I love the city for creating the bylaw as quickly as they did, there's a lot of holes in the bylaw. So I had to go to committee of adjustment because of one of those holes. But when I presented a committee of adjustment, it's like they stopped committee for like 15, 20 minutes just to talk about like and sort of praise my project, both in just the aesthetic of it. They were like, this is what we were thinking of. Just very simple, not complicated, simple, aesthetic, but pragmatic approach to these buildings, right? We're not looking for these crazy ritzy whatever. So it really fit their concept. And, it really made me sort of understand that, like, I think I've got more of an initiative on my hands here than just a solution for my own problem.
Right.
So when I started to get the word out a bit, the first thing to do was to build it. Let's build it. Right. So, and again, a lot of people have seen shipping containers on A&E or TLC and, oh, that's a cool idea. It's a cool idea. But nobody does it. Right. And then, so I was like, I have to do it. Like we have to do it to see if it's actually viable. So we did it, and we learned a ton of, mistakes from it, but that's what the whole point of my project being the prototype.
Any project. You're going to learn from mistakes on any project.
Yeah, exactly. It's right. So
you just hope you never make the same ones.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we learned on the prototype, and it was coming in at 30% less construction costs, and we were building them at, between a third and a half of the construction time.
Right.
So that was huge. And it started, then we started to get the word out, and it was interviewed on 1010 CFRB. And we actually had, I think we had the first open house of a laneway house in the city of Toronto. And,
really?
Hundreds of people came out and they saw it. So the feedback we were getting was huge.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple, but like nice contemporary pragmatic aesthetic. There's no sort of there's no tricks to it. It's just very much like what you see is what you get.
And how many containers?
It all depends on the project. So mine is 2 containers on top of a block garage.
On top of a block garage.
On top of a block garage. So
Yeah.
it's roughly about 400 square foot living space
Yep.
that I've since converted into my architectural office / Airbnb.
I thought you were going to say that it was going to become a jam studio.
And that too, yeah. And then the one we just finished near my house is 4 containers. So it's 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top for just under 800 square feet.
And that is what? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
800 square feet in 2. It's like
800. So 400 square feet per floor. So it's 800 square foot, 2-story unit. It's a 2-story, 2-bed, 1.5 bath unit.
It's pretty big.
Yeah, it's good, right? And again, we're coming in at roughly 30% less construction costs, right? So a lot of people sort of think that's a bit of a sales gimmick or a play on words or some sort of trick, but it's really not, right? Because right off the bat, the first way there's 2 major ways that we're eliminating major costs, right? So when we have the containers on the ground floor as well as the second floor, we don't have a conventional building, like for a building like this, you would have had to do a strip footing all the way around. So you've got your foundation wall down to a strip footing, then you're pouring a concrete slab. We're digging 12 holes in the ground. It's 12 sonotubes in the ground, right? So you're saving, you're in the business, that, right? Like that's a significant amount of money right there just in concrete, labor, rebar, everything, right? So,
and not everybody wants to quote on that kind of stuff.
And not everybody wants to quote on smaller projects like that, right? So to find a guy who's going to quote on that, you're running the risk of them being really not good at their job, right? So your
good diction there.
Yeah, I was about to say So you run so again, not only are we're reducing that and reducing costs, but we're also providing much more peace of mind, knowing that like that concrete slab is never going to crack,
right?
Like your concrete foundation walls are never going to crack, none of that stuff's going to happen, right? So that's number 1. And number 2 is when we put the containers down, that's it. There's we don't have to clad the building at all. Right. It's clad, right? So and again, this, but for the sort of layperson out there, when I say clad, I don't just mean we're saving on the amount of brick or the amount of vinyl siding. It's like the cladding is a whole system that has to go together, right? So you have your framing, and then your sheathing, and then your paper, and then you have to create that airspace. Or before that, you have to put a continuous layer of insulation, and then you have to create an airspace, whether it's Z-girts or whatever it is.
Yep.
And then you've got a flash, and you're through all flashing, and so all these things that it's a system that has to work. And when you're building these systems right up against someone else's garage. First of all, that's hard to do. Yeah. Second of all, 10 years from now, when a part of that fails, how do you fix it? How do you get when your laneway house is 6 inches up against someone's garage, and you get I don't know, a hole develops in your stucco.
Yep.
How the hell are you going to fix that?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to fix that? Right. So
use
again,
use a 2x4 and you're going to slap something at the end of it, and you're going to try to smack it in.
Try to smack it in. Right. So again, not only are we eliminating a massive amount of cost by putting all that stuff in, because we don't have to put any of that in, we're adding a massive amount of peace of mind, knowing that like nothing is ever getting in your welded steel box. Yeah. Like 1,000 years from now, water's not getting into that welded steel box. And that particularly is for the roof, right? So the third way that we do it is if you are going to put a flat roof on your laneway house, which, listen, we all either have had it or know someone who's had a nightmare with a flat roof leaking or whatever it is. And so we don't have to do that. We don't have to build a typical built-up flat roof. The container is the roof. We put a secondary roof on top just to shed water, but it's not to keep the water out. Right. It's just to shed water. What's keeping the water out is a totally welded steel box, right? So
how are you selecting the boxes for a project?
We get all new boxes.
Okay.
Yeah, we get all new containers. Yeah, or they're called single-use containers. Okay. So they've just been packed up once.
Right.
And they come over here. There's no organic materials in or whatever. But again, people say, well, why don't you use recycled boxes or use shipping containers? first of all, a lot of municipalities won't allow us to do it because there's really no documentation on the organic matter that's been in there, and what they clean them with is usually 10 times worse than
chemicals.
what was in them.
Right.
And the other reason is the difference in price between a new container and a used container is basically the same. It's like a $500 difference.
And
There's no difference. Right?
are they using containers that are specified for this, or these are just standard?
No, these are just standard containers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Standard containers that we use a high boy container, which is 9.5 feet tall as opposed to 8 feet tall for sort of a regular container.
Right.
So
And that's exterior to exterior?
that's exterior. Yeah. So inside we'll get, after this, the floor is 6 inches above that bottom line, and then 6 inches. So we end up with 8'6" clear. Finished. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which is for a laneway house, it's phenomenal. Right? Even 8 feet.
Yeah. I mean, for like the standard house that exists, that's not bad at all.
Yeah. For a standard
that's
existing home, it's better than that. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the initiative. And it was starting to become, so talked about, and so, that at first we didn't have its own branding.
Right.
So people sort of thought that Project Studio Architects, that's all we were doing. It was, oh, you specialize in laneway homes. I'm like, no, we still have this fully operational architecture studio that's doing a lot of really cool stuff. And so that's why I decided to brand it and give it its own name. So Blockhouse is, it's the same company, but it's a separate thing, right? So,
and do you have prefab models of this as well, or no?
No,
it's all custom.
Sort of half and half, right? Okay. So going back to that project, the jigsaw puzzle project. And so over my architectural career, I've done enough work with total prefabricated processes. Right. And every single time it just turned out to be more expensive and takes way more time than conventional methods. So a total prefabricated system, to me, in my experience, it just never pans out for what it's always being sort of marketed as, oh, it'll save you so much time and so much money. And it's like, it doesn't, in my experience. And again, a total prefab, when you completely commit 100% to a system, it sort of doesn't give you any flexibility for anything else. So again, I could even go all the way back to my original concept of the centrist. It's like, why do I need to go all the way to one side? Why do I need to go all the way full born with the system? Yeah. Why can't I just take the best elements of a system and leave myself flexibility with the other half, right? So I looked at prefabricated systems, and the shipping containers were exactly that. It's a prefabricated steel box. So that we then go and we, as a prefabricated method off-site, we do all of the fabrication and the cutting of the holes and the shoring up of the structural, the holes and whatever. So
are you you're doing your standard framing on the inside to be able to get some level of R value?
Yeah. So what we do is we bring those containers in, then we fur out the inside, right? So we fur out the inside with a 4-inch stud. Yep. And we put basically 4 inches of spray foam insulation in there, which, gets us our value, our 24. Yeah. But, again, the shipping containers just kept opening themselves to being these amazing building blocks. Right. So that's a perfect example of the 4 inches on the stud inside gives us our 24, which is what everybody's building to anyways. But the corrugations on the outside is an extra 2 inches that when I'm spray foaming, I got to fill that cavity anyway. I'm not going to not fill that cavity. Right. So we're actually getting an extra 2 inches on 50% or more than 50% of our whole building. So we're actually getting on 50% of our whole building, we're actually getting more like an R36 or an R38 than an R24, right? So just by the nature of filling a cavity of those already corrugated exteriors, and we're not doing, it's not like we planned that. It's not like we're doing anything other than just filling the cavity. Right. And we're giving people that much more R value in these things, right? So
do the clients appreciate it? Do they know? Do they understand?
Yeah, they do. But we try to really, they don't understand R value in this and that. They just understand that hey, because that's one of the the first question is oh, how are they insulated and how is this going to work? Do you insulate them? I'm like, yeah, we insulate them. What? People think we wouldn't insulate them?
No, you're gonna see your own breath all winter.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they get the concepts of more, right? So, yeah, we're actually giving you more insulation than you would get in conventional construction, right? So, yeah, so there's a lot of things like that the containers just sort of open themselves to just, and I think the key was as soon as I stopped thinking of these as shipping containers, people are so focused on shipping containers. It's a shipping container, just shipping. Oh, it's a cool building ship. I'm like, it's not a shipping container. It's just a building block. It's a prefabricated building block. As soon as I removed myself from thinking of it as a shipping container, it just became more and more this incredible building block, right?
Yeah,
So,
like a blockhouse.
that's it, like a blockhouse, like a prefabricated blockhouse, right?
Yeah.
So, and we developed one of the things that's totally unique to our system is we've developed a spacer system that goes in between. So, if you put two shipping containers together, they're 8 feet wide, that's 16 feet.
Right.
The problem is that, most of the sites in the city are, 18, 20 feet, 21, whatever it is. So like an 18-foot site, for example, if you put a 16-foot building there, you'd have this perfect 2-foot spot on the side of the house that raccoons are just going to go and and
ravage
and occupy for the next 20 years or 30 years. So we're like, no, and the bylaw is 0 setbacks on the side lots for the laneway home. So let's do that, right? So we've developed a spacer system that allows us to just maximize your site. If your site's 18 feet 6.5 inches, we're gonna hit that.
That's
exactly right.
That's pretty powerful in itself.
Yeah, that was a true game changer, right? Because you're thinking of these prefabricated boxes, and it's like, okay, what are the limitations of this specific box? But now we have this horizontal sort of set opener.
And does your practice incorporate the interior design as well?
Yeah.
To this?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, we've tried to sort of, like, at first I was trying to IKEA-ize the whole thing, right? Because listen, I'm an architect, I'm high on design and the whole thing, but the reality is I'm sitting here thinking it's a 20 by 20 foot square. Like, how many, like, why are architects spending 6 and 7 months designing these things, right? Like, it's a simple floor plate to figure out. There's really only a certain amount of configurations you can come up with, right? So I pretty much come up with every configuration for these typical designs. And the original plan was to have just sort of pick your design and we'll pick a finish and whatever. I mean, the reality is that we're finding that more and more people, as I wanted to sort of IKEA-ize it, they're really IKEA-ize it, right? Which I thought was a great business model. It still is in a general sense, but we're realizing more and more that people see these as like little mini custom homes, right? Like they want their own custom thing, right? But we have a really good kitchen guy that we deal with, and we have a really good, like certain things we're able to sort of go back to the well and just reconfigure the plans a little bit, right?
So what do you do in scenarios where someone's looking for different types of aesthetics?
On the outside?
On the
outside, so we've done that. So we did one up in Baysville. Very cool project. It was actually 440 footers. So it was like 1,200 square feet. It was big. But because it's up in the woods, so the bottom we left as corrugated black metal.
Yep.
And then the top containers we clad in cedar, right? So again, like, it's not hard to clad. We can put anything on it, right? And the good thing about cladding is if that cladding ever fails, all you have to worry about is that it's an aesthetic fail, right? Like, it's you never have to worry about. People don't realize that people don't really fully appreciate the fact that, like, if you see a hole in your brick, that's not just doesn't just look bad. It's like, that's going to cause
problems.
Functional problem. There's a major functional problem there.
Yeah.
Like, that little hole in your brick could end up being a major, like, water damage in your basement type thing, right?
I just had last week. I had a woodpecker.
Right.
Pecking at the stucco of the place that we're in right now in my backyard.
Yeah, that can
be
end up
detrimental.
Being really bad, right? Yeah. Like the littlest little things, like a little tiny little hole, like insects can get in, or termites, or whatever it is, right? So
exactly.
So we can clad it in whatever you want. We can paint it any color you want. We can do whatever we want, right? So yeah. So it's actually, for these self sort of prefabricated rigid boxes, I'm continually surprised at the level of flexibility it allows for design, right? People have sort of gotten, especially in architecture school. When I was in architecture school, nobody wanted to draw a box. Like, everybody wanted to draw Frank Gehry, crazy curvy, blah blah blah, and and you realize, man, like, most of the stuff out there is a box. Why? Because it just works as a form.
Or it has to be.
It sort of has to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, but when you look around, you see tons of stuff, like tons of just boxes that are just like, they look great. They look proportional and they look great. So,
Yeah.
sort of going back to that concept of like, there's nothing wrong with the box, right? Like, so, but there's also ways of working with a box that can still push your creativity, right? So that's what I'm finding with this whole Blockhouse initiative, right? Because I've set up the narrative that I'm like, I'm working with a box. I'm working with blocks. It's like working with Lego. Like, how many?
I was gonna say you're just an adult playing with more expensive.
That's
Lego.
That's it. I'm just playing with Lego yet again, right? So, yeah. So it's been good.
Shout out to Lego.
Shout out to Lego. Lego needs to sponsor this.
Yeah, like anyone from
podcast.
Lego out there that wants to do some advertising with us, you feel free to let us know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I actually am going to say that if you're out there and you're listening to this and you come across it, through Spotify or through Apple Music or YouTube, make sure to give it either a follow or to give it a rating, and preferably a higher rating, because here we are talking about some pretty interesting things that I think pretty much anyone that's listening has the opportunity to be able to learn from.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful. And in doing that, it just helps other people recognize the podcast and puts it in front of them. So outside of that little plug, I want to ask you a little bit about you. So outside of your practice, what does your life look like? What are some of the interests you have, hobbies you have?
Yeah.
Family.
Yeah, I've got a lovely wife and 2 lovely kids.
Yeah.
I think, again, I think I can sort of go back to, a creative with ADD is usually an interesting thing, right? So I was actually, me and a partner, he's actually still going. We had a photography company together for about 10 years.
Okay.
So that was good. So I'm a photographer. I'm also a musician. I've been in, tons of bands my whole life. I'm a guitar player and a drummer.
Yeah.
And,
you play drums too?
I play drums and I play percussion. So I'm actually playing in a Little Feat cover band. So yeah, we just played the Horseshoe Tavern on November 21st, and it was good. It was a Little Feat cover band.
Nice.
We sold out the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's how I keep busy. I'm also a huge golfer.
Okay.
And so so golf, architecture, just gravitated towards the things that you're passionate about, and they just kick you in the stomach all the time, and just maybe continuously get you to question what the hell you started this stuff.
Man, golfing to me is such a wild concept. I've golfed on and off throughout the years, and that ball just staring at you doing nothing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's the hardest thing to do, and it's like, but it's just sitting there. It's not doing anything.
It's not doing anything. It's all it's you know what it's doing? It's playing mind games with you the entire time.
It's 99% mind and mental. Yeah.
And do your kids have an interest in any of those same hobbies, interests?
Yeah, my son is a musician, so he's getting to be a pretty serious bass player.
Awesome.
Yeah, so he's only 13, but he'll be up on stage pretty soon. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, my daughter's, she's into dancing and that whole thing. So, but like, they're both creatives, right? So, which can be really tricky. The more creative your path is as a vocation, as an occupation, it can be difficult, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting, but it's creativity, having that creative gene, it just drives you,
right?
So it's hard to sort of ignore it or not follow it, right? So yeah, it's good when you can follow it and make it work. Yeah, make it work. So
well, I appreciate it, Ben. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for taking the time out of the day.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining all the interesting things that you've done and you continue to do. And again, for those listening, you'll be able to see some of Ben's work when you log on to Instagram. You check out our account Behind the Build. I'll feature some of his work throughout the week, and from there you'll have links to be able to get to his own work on his side beyond what I feature on Behind the Build. And thank you. The podcast. This whole thing is made possible through Walden Homes. It's where I work. This, again, was a concept that we came up with years ago. And one of the exciting elements of what we have tried to really put forward in this is the key value we have in honoring architecture and what design is and how it connects to what is getting built in how what's getting built should connect to what has been designed.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to be able to have conversations, and really different conversations about what this thing is.
Yeah,
So it's one of the happy things that we've been able to take on at Walden has been this podcast.
Yeah.
So
no, it's great, and I'm super appreciative of you guys, out there doing it, right? Because and especially it's very, it's obviously very Toronto centric. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
In its own right. So
yeah, and it's there's going to be a lot more international people coming on, and beyond Toronto. Yeah, there's going to be there's a lot more that's coming. Yeah. So thank you for it, and thank you for listening.